Hello, everyone. How's it going? Can you hear me all right? Let me know if the audio is okay. How's it going, Georgie? How's it going, John? Tenko? Tevin? That's correct. Those images were from the art book. Yeah, John, it's been a while. I haven't been on lately. Um, I guess maybe I should start with that with just a little update. Oh, good to hear it. So I am working on a script at the moment. Um, hey, El, how's it going? Um, so I am working on a script. Um, Actually, so I wrote about 10 pages uh, regarding the sort of cosmology of Elden Ring, and getting into the spirit world and all sorts of what I call the inverted world. Um, and then that it was kind of a mess. So then I stopped writing that, and then I started writing something else, which was about the different sort of denominations of the religions in the lands between, and like parallels with the Protestant Reformation and stuff like that. And then that got kind of out of hand. So I wrote about 5 pages on that. So now I've started writing a different script. I'm about 3 or 4 pages in, where I'm trying to kind of combine both of those ideas and talk about America and Rodriguez's line about immortal essence and um, a bunch of other things. The Giants, the Newman, Beastmen, uh, how America is the Glomide Queen, which we might talk about today. Uh, a bunch of different things. So I'm trying to weave that all together, but it's kind of tricky. And my real life, my non Elden Ring life, is fairly busy at the moment. So I haven't had much time. Audio is a little low. I can turn it up, but be careful what you wish for. So that's a little bit higher. Let's see if that's okay. Um, yeah, it's so hard with this interconnected lore. Exactly. Yeah, it's. I'm trying to bring all the different thoughts that I've had since my last video together into a cohesive whole, but also not just talk about absolutely everything because I need to focus it a little bit. So anyway, so that is TBD. Not sure when that will come out. I'm not even done with the script yet, and then I have to do the editing part. So, um, yeah. So there's a bunch of different things going on there. Um, hello, Killer Vic. Um, what was I gonna say? Let's see. Oh, because I wanted to talk about. Oh, yeah. So, well, okay. First of all, what we're doing today. So, first of all, I have the 1.0 version of Elden Ring here, which I've been going through, just about complete, one playthrough of, and I wanted to just. I don't want to like go through the entire thing, and there's some stuff which I can't show you because I've already gone past it. So, for instance, Lendell, the original Lendell, very, very different. I can't show that to you because I've already burnt Lendell down, so that's unfortunate. But I did want to highlight some interesting item descriptions from 1.0 and one particular location as well. So we'll look at that. And then I also have a Miro board, and I just sort of put this together. I initially just wanted to put together a timeline, which, well, we'll look at that. I put a timeline together, and then I started adding on other things like this sort of map of the different ideologies and factions and some other concepts and stuff. So, so we'll look at that. Before we get started, though, I wanted to address Hidden Shadow. Hidden Shadow left a comment somewhere where he was asking for whether my next video, this was a while ago, he was asking whether my next video would address the issue of Mikkel and Melania's shadows. And then I said I would, and then I ended up cutting that out of the video that I did. So I wanted to talk about that first. So let me. Here's my thoughts on Mikola and Melania's shadows. So one, the obvious connotation here is that Melania is Mikola's shadow, because you have the whole idea of like the wolves through the FromSoft games. They always have this connotation of being they're sort of associated with knights and nobility and loyalty in particular, and it's sort of a lot of it is derived from Berserk, where sort of the beast of darkness Guts, this is like the swordsman, and this is what Artorias from Dark Souls is based on. And then you have Sekiro, who is Wolf, and he has a prosthetic arm. And then you have Melania, who has a prosthetic arm, and she's this amazing sword fighter, and she's incredibly loyal to Mikola. So there's definitely like thematically, she is kind of Mikola's shadow. And then I think there's something else going on, which I'll just sort of mention, and I don't have totally clear thoughts on this yet. But you hate Berserk? Why would you hate Berserk? That's ridiculous. Berserk is incredible. There is another implication, which is that as you become a god, you sort of. Well, maybe we should open up the Miro board now, because I want to have some visual something here. Dogs represent sin and evil. Okay, let's see. Let me just bring up the Miro board. Where is it? We'll shut this off for a second and go to this one. The link to this Miro board is in the description for the video, but I would ask that none of you actually go onto it right now, because it tends to get clogged up when there's a lot of people in the same Miro board, and my 10-year-old computer is already struggling with everything, so I just want to be able to. It's taking forever to load. I feel like I'm on 90s internet right now. I will eventually get a new computer, but oh my god, yeah, this is really slow. This is even worse than I thought. Come on. We're getting there. It's like slowly coming into focus. Oh my god, this is unbelievable. Okay, so but while oh no, wait, I'll wait. While it's trying to figure its life out, I'll just say this, that there is this implication that, so if you imagine that you draw a spectrum from like completely normal human to divine entity, and then there's these things that exist along that spectrum. So there's like, you have the demigods, and they're like more than just human. And then you have someone like Marika, who's a god. But then you also have things that, like the outer gods, where they're almost just concepts. They're not even really, it's not really clear, like Rot isn't really, well, theoretically it's a scorpion, but it's also just like it is Rot. It is the concept of Rot, or the formless mother is just like this birth of blood, this vague concept. So, and what you see is that as people become more powerful and more godlike, they I think this is the idea. I'm not saying this is true necessarily, but this is the idea that I'm working with, is that as they become more godlike, they sacrifice the sort of physical aspects. So, for instance, Melania is essentially killed, by Radahn, or she's stabbed by Radahn, and that's when she blossoms. And the same thing happens in her boss fight, and then she becomes a goddess because of that. Or Millicent, Gowry tells you to kill Millicent so that she can be reborn as a Scarlet Valkyrie. So it's like this idea that through death you are reborn into something more than human. And I think potentially the thing with Melanian. Okay, so that's one idea. Oh, and there's also like the fire giant, right? He sacrifices his leg to awaken the fell god. So I think this is kind of vague in my head right now. I need to actually write this down and structure it into my script before I can really figure out what my thoughts are. But the idea would be that, like, in order to become a god, like a god is just a concept because concepts are immortal. So the world of concepts, which I think is also space. This is a lot of stuff I'm throwing at once, but that to become a god, you have to sacrifice the conditional parts of your existence, the physical human parts, and then you become more and more just a concept. And the deal with Melania and Mikla. So, okay, backtrack a second. My thoughts on this are not very organized yet, as you can tell. Potentially, the Beastmen expunged their beastly parts through death and became humans. That's sort of an idea I'm playing with. This is very like tinfoily right now because I can't really put the argument together clearly. But this idea of like the development of life, it's by expunging these bestial aspects, and then that's what like an Empyrean is already on the way to becoming a god. So they're sort of removed from those more physical, more bestial parts, but they have this shadow because they're still connected to that. So they have this shadow, which is a beast, right? It's like connecting them to the physical realm. And I think possibly with Mikla and Melania is that they were born or created without that part. And that's why they were so powerful, and so they were like born Empyreans instantly because they weren't just selected. Like it was, they weren't born through normal means. They were born through, I don't know, the tree or through this weird combination of the America Radigan Rebus, and somehow that like they were already purified of that more physical stuff. Like they were closer to a concept, and that's also why they're cursed, because they're like not complete exactly. So the idea would be that they don't have shadows because they're not actually connected in the same way to the physical realm. That's kind of where I'm gonna have to like organize this into a more compelling theory, but that's sort of where my thoughts are on the shadow thing. There's also the Red Wolf of Radigan, which you could argue is one of their shadows, although it is purely a wolf. It's not like a beast man like Blyther or Malekith. So I don't know. There's a lot of stuff going on there. That's where my thoughts are right now. Okay. Like the apostles in Berserk go through a death and rebirth. Yeah, exactly. I've always found it strange that she acts more like her brother's soldier rather than her equal, especially since they were both Empyreans. Then again, Mikla and his compelling... Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely... I mean, I think everybody sort of gets this sense that, like, there is something slightly off about Mikla. This idea that, like, he knows how to compel affection. That people are, like, kamikazing, blowing themselves up and to help him return. There's like this sort of fanaticism towards him, which doesn't seem completely healthy. Um, and Melania is not. Melania is sort of, yeah, she doesn't seem to have like her own motivations. She's totally just working for Mikla, right? She's not trying to create her own order. Like the Order of Rot is kind of working through her, but she's not really, at least until the end, she's sort of opposed to it. She's like trying to keep it at bay. So it's kind of interesting that relationship. I think it's so funny that Miyazaki's plots have gotten so unhinged that we're trying to figure out the plot by using the themes. In most stories, you derive the themes by looking at the story. Yeah, I mean, well, I think it's there. Most stories aren't, most stories want to tell you everything. But I think actually, like, if you read something like, I don't know, it's hard to compare. Actually, I mean, if you read like myths or religious texts, I think it's more similar to that, where you do use the themes to figure out what's going on, like what the actual events. You figure out the events by figuring out like the broader concepts first. Um, so it is, and I think that's what Miyazaki is attempting to do with his stories, is do something like a myth or a. I think maybe it ranges from like a fairy tale to a myth to like a religious text. It's in that kind of category. Um, Miyazaki and GRRM are both that kind of writer, and together they are way too powerful. Yeah, it is kind of ridiculous. What does Ronnie give up to ascend to Empyrean? Um, well, arguably, Ronnie was born from the Amber Egg. Um, so I'm not sure if I want to get into that now because I'm not even completely convinced of this. There's a video made by someone called TLGTW. It's like a 4.5 hour video. It's their only thing, a small channel, going into Empyreans and how magic works and the universe and everything in Elden Ring. Fantastic video. So the way it's delivered sometimes annoys me, but they make some excellent points. They're very eloquent. And they point out that the Japanese for the rune of the unborn. Now, this is sort of the limits of my understanding of Japanese. It's is it umu? I think is the verb. It's the past tense negative form of the verb. So it's not like in English you would most likely read unborn as like yet to be born, but it's pretty clear in Japanese that this is like wasn't born, and potentially this is where I'm not sure about it. Potentially you could read it as like the birth was not done, the birth the it was anti-born in a way like that, like their birth was not, and if that makes sense. So what TLGTW argues is that this is referring to Ronnie, who killed her body and in a sense had her birth undone. Something about that doesn't quite sit with me, but I mean, it is significant that like her voice and like this shadowy thing comes out of the amber egg. That's sort of interesting, and that Renala is using it to create a bunch of, well, I don't know what they are, these reborn scholars, but they all look like she's trying to create one person. There's an indeterminate amount of confusing things with Ronnie. However, it does seem like killing her body is something that allowed her to go further along the path to like tremendous power and godlike status, which I think is essentially what happens in her ending. Is she becomes a god. So there is a theme here of like you sacrifice something to a god in order to gain power, and the thing that you sacrifice is like the thing that makes you human. And this is not, I mean, this is not, not only is it not unique to Elden Ring, I mean, it's in other FromSoft games, but it's not even unique to Miyazaki. This is like a fairly common trope to some degree. But it's something that I'm trying to work out, and I don't really want to. I don't want to talk about it too much until I have more organized thoughts on it. Some of her issue, I think, is the rot making her lose herself, while Miquella's gold is holding her together in more ways than one. So she's kind of got nothing but him to cling to. Yeah. Yeah. Do you think there is a best ending in this game? I think it's transparent as glass that Ronnie's ending is the best one. I mean, the problem is it really depends on exactly what you think happens in the endings. Like, it seems pretty clear that the Frenzied Flame ending is not good, right? I think everybody sort of agrees on that. It's like the people who are... So forget about what you think is actually going on. Like, just look at the people who are trying to promote one ending or one vision versus the people that are against it. Like, Melina says, don't do the Frenzied Flame stuff because, like, there are births, life endures, life is good, we don't want a lifeless world. Like, okay. And then the people who want to promote it are like, chaos, burn it all down. You know, so that's probably bad. The Dung Eater one is a little bit more difficult to make sense of. Because it's couched in all this language of like curse and despair and stuff like that. But you have to always take a little pinch of salt with the way things are characterized in terms of like moralistic judgment in these games, because this is within the context of the Golden Order. And I know that Dung Eater's ending is not necessarily like his Age of Blessing of Despair or whatever is not necessarily the Golden Order, although it's not necessarily not the Golden Order anymore, because the Golden Order is fungible. It's not one ideology. It's changed over time. So, and Miyazaki also does have a habit of taking things that seem to be really good and pure and holy, and then revealing them to be the worst, most despicable thing possible, which is, I think, also why people are suspicious of Miquella. And then vice versa, taking things that seem really horrible and disgusting and despicable and making them extremely sympathetic and good, well, good-hearted, I don't know, but making them good. Taking the bad and taking what looks bad and making it good, and then taking what looks good and making it bad. This is like the core structure of his storytelling, essentially. So I am a little bit confused about the Omen and the Dung Eater stuff. I mean, you know, he's eating people's dung. That's not a good sign. But again, you know, I don't know exactly what's going on there. Gold Mask is sort of the opposite, where it seems good. It seems good. Like, well, okay, perfect order. And, you know, he comes to this ending. This is something I'm going to discuss in my script. He comes to this realization that, like, oh, the gods are just as fickle as men. And so you can assume that his order it's sort of like, well, yeah, the gods aren't special. It's the perfect order can't be based on the gods, essentially. I think something like that. But, you know, the idea of perfect order, there is something very... there's something very suspicious about that, because perfect order is like, this is what the Nazis wanted. They wanted perfect order, You know, there is a real dark side to trying to achieve order, perfect order, like a utopian vision of the world where everything is orderly. There's something deeply suspicious about that. Um, so I'm a little unsure about Gold Mask. Like I don't get that sense from him necessarily, and he also sort of he thinks the hunters, I guess, in favor of his ending. You know, he says he thinks that the hunters they wanted an absolute evil to contend with, and he's like, this is dumb. These hunters are dumb. Like they're trying to fight a battle of good versus evil, and they don't understand. So it seems like he has transcended that, and his rune is a rune of transcendental ideology. So I'm not totally sure about that. Ronnie's ending, yeah, Ronnie's ending is, they both come to the same. Ronnie and Goldmask have the same conclusion about the gods, but they disagree about to preserve the order or not. Well, Ronnie doesn't. I mean, they both want order. Ronnie still has order, but it's just that hers is a different order. Hers is not a golden order. So that's. I mean, if you look at the 6 different endings, right? Only the Frenzied Flame and Ronnie's ending have special cutscenes, which should tell you that like those are particularly important. They represent something particularly important. All the other endings, it's the same cutscene with some, you know, different effects, different dialogue, different effects. But Ronnie's ending in the Frenzied Flame cutscene, these represent something much more significant. Ronnie's ending, and this would be why I would actually suggest that all of the tree endings, if you call them that, are still part of the Golden Order. It's just a different permutation of the Golden Order. Ronnie's ending is the only one where you have order that is not gold. And she explicitly says that. It's not an order of gold, but it's an order of the stars in the chill night, guided by the moon. So she is still in favor of order. She just doesn't want order to be affected by, let's say, the whims of mankind, because this is I don't know if I want to get into this because I have to get into a bunch of other things to kind of explain my thoughts here. But I think it goes into the idea that I proposed in my last video, how the Elden Ring is an expression, in the Greater Will, is an expression of like the collective consciousness of all the people in the lands between. So if you think that like this order is created by how people believe and look at the world, well, that's very prone to the chaotic fluctuations of just people believing different things and not being united. And so Ronnie's ending is like she's taking order out of that. She's taking the gold out of that. She's moving order into the stars where it was originally, and now things are in the stars. People can't affect the order. So there's still order regardless of what people believe and feel. That's basically the idea, I think. So you could argue that that's the best version. Although there's an argument against it as well. Do you have thoughts on the absence of the sun in ER? Well, the sun does exist, and I don't. I mean, if you mean like the narrative absence, that it's very small and unimportant, and there's almost no reference to it, there is, I think, significance to the absence, and the fact that the sun is always shining in Farum Azula, and that Farum Azula is stuck in time. Yeah, Ronnie wants no interference and achieves this by moving the order. Goldmask also wants no interference, but just removes the god's free will. Like the difference between putting distance or iron bars between the order and the domain. I'm not sure about the god's free will point. uh, I think the parallel here would be, um, the parallel here would be, I think Gold Mask's. I mean, the thing with Gold Mask is that he comes to this vision of order, uh, by realizing that essentially that Marika is not the one true God, that she is fallible. So the sort of historical analogy would be like in the Protestant Reformation, like Martin Luther sort of saying, well, no. The only way that you are saved is it's not by buying, it's not by the whims of the church. It's through Scripture alone, through faith alone, through grace alone. This is it's by studying the Scripture, which it's literally called, like the Scripture wooden shield in Elden Ring, that you receive grace, and this can't be something up to the whims of the figurehead, in this case Marika, that she is not really this infallible figure, that she's kind of, in his vision, she's like the Pope, and he's creating a Protestant Reformation. That would be the analogy that I would say. So I don't know if it's about Marika's free will, although that is a component of this, but sola scriptura, yeah, exactly. Sola scriptura, sola fide, sola fide, sola gratis. Yeah, exactly. And that is exactly Gold Mask's. It's through understanding of the text, right? Through understanding of the Elden Ring, which is literally text, right? Because they're runes, they're letters. So it's a kind of scripture. This is how the two fingers writes. Through understanding of that, that you receive grace. Now, the sola fide part, only through faith, is a little bit suspicious to apply that to Gold Mask, because fundamentalism seems to be about getting away from faith. So it's not an exact match. Funny you would compare Gold Mask to Martin Luther. I'm expecting a Tarnished Archaeologist video on that subject at some point. Yeah. What are your thoughts on Chapel of Anticipation? What is it, and why do we start there? Well, we start there because we are anticipating the rest of the game. But why we start there? Well, this is very confusing. But we start there because we die and we're reborn, right? Like, that's literally how the process by which we start there. So we die somewhere that's not the lands. I mean, it's not anywhere that we can go in game, unless you think that it's inside the Erdtree, which doesn't make much sense. So the idea is the Tarnished are outside the lands, and they're called by grace to the lands between. So we die outside the lands between, and then we are revived by grace, and we are, let's say, reborn in the Chapel of Anticipation. So that may be its function. The one thing that's interesting about the Chapel of Anticipation is that it is the middle ground between the other two parts that the belfries lead to. So the belfries lead to the three, let's say, levels of the world, the underworld, the heavens, and the lands between. They lead to Nokron, Farum Azula, and the Chapel of Anticipation. So there is a significance to that chapel in particular on that level. It's the middle one. Vare killed our maiden. That's possible. I know people say that. I mean, I'm not totally sure about that. For all we know, Melina killed our maiden so that she could take her place. I mean, I don't know that there's enough evidence that Vare killed our maiden, besides that sort of like fits his MO. But okay, so I guess let's just continue through this whiteboard. I started by making this timeline, so I guess we'll just start there. So there's three different things going on here. There's the timeline of the Erdtree and the Elden Ring. Then there's the timeline of Elden Lords, demigods, and I put and medials, just like the other really important, powerful characters. Vari knows we're maidenless. That's true. Yeah. That's so romantic. That's funny. And then we also have the wars and conflict. So I kind of want to start in the middle of this. So I did a whole video on the Crucible, and I still don't really understand what it is. But I think if we're just going by like what exactly the text says, the text says the Crucible, the Erd Tree in its primordial form. So the Crucible is the Erd Tree, in some sense. I mean, now you can argue that maybe there's like the Erd Tree proper. There's like the modern Erd Tree versus its primordial form. In the same way that you might say like we call, like, day refers to two things, right? It refers to the day as a whole, and then it also refers to day as opposed to night, right? But night is part of day in that sense, if you see what I mean. So the Erd Tree could be something like that, where the Crucible was not the Erd Tree, but it was also part of the Erd Tree in general, if that makes sense. In any case, this line very explicitly says that the Crucible was the Erd Tree. Exactly what that means is vague, but so I put the before the Erd Tree kind of with this, there's something going on here, exactly where the Crucible starts, not totally clear. But anyway, before the Erd Tree, we know several things. We know that, actually, I'll go up here first. We know that before the Erd Tree, the ancient dynasty existed. They flourished in the age before the Erd Tree. They have claymen as priests. And the claymen, now I put in this now because it's not clear whether they always searched for lost oracles within the bubbles. You would assume that if they lost their oracles, then they weren't always they had them at one point, and so in the past they weren't searching for them. In any case, now they're searching for lost oracles within the bubbles. And then, yeah, they wield harpoons of blue-white meteoric ore, which also connects them to the Alabaster Lords, who also wield blue-white meteoric ore swords. That's kind of interesting. That's also interesting because there is an Alabaster Lord in the Ould Ancient Dynasty ruins, where the Lake of Rot is now. So there's some connection there. The bubbles, yeah, the bubbles are very confusing. And then I also put this in, given the name and the way claymen emerge from puddles of goop, they seem to be something like proto-silver tears, some kind of homunculi. So the claymen don't resemble Elden John, like the picture of Elden, the big statue. He looks like a guy. Claymen look like weird golem-y things, right? And they're called claymen. So I would strongly guess that the claymen were created. They were not like originally people who turned into clay or anything like that. I think they were created, and the way that they sort of emerge from these puddles is very similar to the silver tears and the mimic tears. So, and then, Nokron and the Nox are sort of built around these Ul ruins. So that's what I think was going on there, that basically the Nox kind of adopted that practice in a different format from the Ancient Dynasty. We also know that before the Erd Tree, we have the Deathrite priests. In the time when there was no Erd Tree, death was burned in ghost flame, and the Deathbirds were the keepers of that fire. And you had these Deathbird priests that, this is an interesting line. I'm going to talk about this more in the video that I'm writing. So, but Yeah, I'm not sure what to see because it says so priests were they served as guardians through the rite of death, which also served as an oath sworn to their distant resurrection. Whether that means like they burned themselves, or whether they were going to be resurrected like as themselves or as a death bird. It's very confusing. This is also involves the Helfin and stuff like this. Anyway, so we know that there was some kind of death rite stuff happening before the Erd Tree. What else do we know happened before the Erd Tree? Well, there are the Titans, or that's what I like to call them, which are the giant giants, like those giant skulls in the mountaintops in Caelid, the ones that are way bigger than anything else. And I mean, there's literally no context for those things. So I think the idea there is that there's history before anything that we know about that we have no context for. Like history starts at a certain point where we can actually record it, and before that there's still stuff going on and we have no idea what it is. It's just huge giants, like it's a totally different age that we know nothing about. Could the bubble be related to moons? Man, there's a lot of stuff. So, okay, let's see. I guess we could just go over to. I have this other category of fundamental elements. Maybe this is a better place to start, actually. So we have the cosmos. We have the primeval current, which in Japanese translates to something like source. It's like a source water. The full moon, the dark moon, the black moon. Potentially, the dark moon is just the black moon. The more and more I think that's likely, and actually I think it's possible that all of the moons are the same thing in different forms. I've got some ideas about that, but anyway, I'm just going to go through this. We have the golden star, which is how the Elden Beast arrived. There's the sun, which is very tiny. There's the eclipsed sun, which we never actually see. There's Estelle, who's called a malformed star. And there's the blood star. And we do see on the Great Star's mace, there's two stars depicted. Sinister Stromboli, by the way, I highly recommend looking him up. Yeah, he has a great video on the different stars of Elden Ring and the symbolism behind it. And also a great two-parter on Destined Death, which is fantastic. Yeah, I very easily overwhelmed because we can just go in any direction so easily. Different moons could be different moon phases. I think that's right. And it kind of symbolizes Ranni and Rennala. Like Ranni is taking over from Rennala, so she's the next phase of the moon, you know. And that may be how like the old snowy crone may have. It may be that her moon was the black moon of Noxtella, or maybe just a moon that we didn't see, and that like when Rennala took over, that she had the full moon. Anyway, the thing I was going to check out was the bubbles, because all the stuff with water, there's a definite theme here of death. Especially, so Godwyn has a fishtail, and he's got kind of like an oyster face. Tibia mariners ride water, spirit jellyfish, and then you have the Claymen, who are not living, and they're searching for something in bubbles. There's the Oracle envoys, who are even more mysterious, I think. They've got something in their turban that I don't, there's like a whimpering creature or something in there. Actually, now that I just thought of this, I just literally thought of this right now, so I'm going to add this in. Hold on. Oh my god. It's not doing anything. Oh, this is so slow. Okay, maybe I'll add this in later. No. Stop. Okay, I'll fix this later. What I was gonna add is the cemetery shades, because the cemetery shades have like a crab on their head. If you look at them like they're a person, but there's like a crab gripping their head. And I think they're always connected to some kind of like sorcery thing, which is also connected to crabs. But maybe it's like their spirit got parasitized by something in the water, and water is like the in-between state of life and death. Anyway, that's an idea, and it could be the same with the Oracle Envoys, that they have like a, I don't know, an octopus on their head or something. I'll have to think about that. Actually, the more I think of that, the more I feel like that's likely. And all the white flesh stuff, so they drop white flesh. The strips of white flesh, that's always something related to water. It's like crabs and crayfish, and it's always watery things that have the white flesh. The octopus, the land octopus. Ancestor Spirit Arena features stagnant water. Yeah, there's a definite connection there. I'm gonna get into this more in my video for sure, but I think that the idea is that water is like a reflection point, and the spirit world is underneath it, or it's in the deep, and it's also space, and that's why, like, if you're in the shallow layer, let's say, you're like not fully down there yet. It's like the interstice from Berserk, but it just happens to be watery, and that's also where the Lands Between is now. It's a little too complicated to get into right now, and I am literally writing about it at the moment, so I want to leave that for the next video. So, okay, we know a couple things before the Erd Tree. We know that Dragon Lord Placidusax is Elden Lord in the age before the Erd Tree. And we know that he exists in outside of time now. And it seems to be sort of stuck in the past. One of the interesting things about Farum Azula is that you can only see Farum Azula from the isolated Divine Tower. And in fact, someone pointed out to me that that literally Farum Azula is not loaded into the game unless you warp to either the Divine Tower or to Farum Azula itself. So it doesn't even exist because it's outside of time. And the description says that the storm is outside of time, not Farum Azula as a whole. But actually, if you look at it, like, the storm, in order to reach Placidusax, the storm it goes outward and it encompasses the whole of Farum Azula, and then you actually are going backwards in time when you do that. Whereas Farum Azula is stuck in one time, right? The sun is always in the same place. So they are both. There's time shenanigans happening to the whole city. Okay. The modern dragons are born at some point. We don't really know when. Presumably by Grail, who is called an elder dragon, which is kind of interesting. Not ancient dragon, not modern dragon. Just called the elder dragon. And this had to happen before the fire giants drove the ice dragons from the mountaintops here. Because at least, now it's possible ice dragons, there was like a different kind of ice dragon who were ancient dragons or something like that, but at least based on Borealis, he's a modern dragon. That's where we get the description of the ice dragons from. So the only safe assumption there is that the ice dragons were modern dragons, which means that they had to have been born before they got driven from the mountaintops, from the peak. Okay, but why does that happen when you take a nap on a slab of rock that doesn't have a skelly in it like all the other slabs? Well, presumably because you are kind of dying. And I think dying and sleeping is very related ideas. So you're like sleeping, but you're also kind of dying, like the skeletons who are dead. Why that would cause it to go backwards in time, I don't know. Memory, death. There's a lot of different concepts there. Oops. Radigan, Godfrey, and Renala are born or created at some point, literally any point, until they first are mentioned. Not really sure. We know that Sarash exists before Godfrey becomes first Elden Lord, because that's when he takes... Well, this is even debatable, because I think there's a good reason to suspect that Sarash is part of Horalu. But anyway, that's beside the point. We also know that the Knights of Zamor have been challenging the fire giants since ancient times. Now, the thing is that the Knights of Zamor, the place, is in the mountaintops. So, this is not absolutely for sure, but if the fire giants drove the ice dragons... I should be careful with the language here, because I think it says from the peak. So it may be that the fire giants already exist in the mountaintops, but I think the idea is that the fire giants came from somewhere else, and the ice dragons were on the mountaintops. The fire giants came up, they drove the ice dragons away, and they took over the mountaintops. And then the Knights of Zamor and their whole battle with the fire giants has to have happened after that. We know that Godfrey becomes first Elden Lord, and we know that... So the big event here is the war with the giants, after which the Flame of Ruin is sealed, and it's only after this that the Age of the Erd Tree begins. That doesn't mean the Erd Tree didn't exist, it just means that the age of the Erd Tree begins then. So it's an age that's defined by the Erd Tree. And I think what you have here is, so the Crucible Knights are Godfrey's knights, and that sort of associates him with the Crucible. And the Crucible incantations, I put the ancient Erd Tree here because the Crucible incantations, like the aspects of the Crucible incantations, they use the ancient Erd Tree sigil. And this is the one that I wonder if I can find it here. Let me just bring them up really quick, because that will be useful. And the ancient Erd Tree sigil is like, it's also used for I think it's the blessing ones, the things that refer to the Age of Plenty. So there's this connection between the Erd Tree... Oh, no, don't go there. The Erd Tree and the Age of Plenty. And, you know, I'll find it later, because my computer's really struggling right now. In any case, what it seems like is that there's this progression, right, from the Crucible, which is also possibly the ancient Erd Tree, or the ancient Erd Tree comes out of the Crucible, to like the modern Erd Tree, and then the Golden Order. I don't know if it's necessarily a progression with like distinct stages, and it may have just been something that gradually happened over time. That's the impression that I get. But in any case, the big event is the sealing the flame of ruin, which makes sense because if there's this big flame that's burning the Erd Tree, and the fire giants specifically are enemies of the Erd Tree. They've been enemies of the Erd Tree since ancient times. I think that's the wording. Or maybe they've long been enemies of the Erd Tree, something like that. Then sealing the flame would allow the Erd Tree to like flourish and develop. So that all makes sense. The war with the giants, the siege of Castle Morn. I'm not really sure where to put this because there's almost no context for it. It involves Godfrey, so it has to be sometime during his life in the lands between, but could be before the war with the giants, could be afterwards. Not really sure. What did I write here? Oh my god, zoom in please. What is going on? Yeah, I mean the fact that it's this sort of Norman style architecture suggests an earlier time period to me, but it could really be anything. Radigan is America at some point, arguably before Ronnie is born. That arguably meaning if Ronnie is, I mean the thing is like the opening intro is really clear that it says America's offspring, demigods all. It doesn't even say America's children. It says America's offspring, demigods all, and it shows a picture of Ronnie. Like, I don't know what way to interpret that except that Ronnie, at least, and if not Radon and Rykard as well, are children of America. Like, literally her offspring. Which only makes sense if Radigan was already America. Talking about Norse mythology, interesting. Yeah. This is something I'm going to mention in my script, because one of the things about the fire giants, like, if you look at the Norse creation myth, and obviously there's a huge amount of Norse mythology inspiration in Elden Ring. I mean, the idea of, like, this world tree, essentially, is a huge thing. The fire giants, like, and literally, I mean, in Norse mythology, there's a fire giant who burns down the world tree. Like, this is what you essentially do in Elden Ring. But the thing about Norse mythology is that, like, the creation myth, you have this primordial void called Ginnungagap, and on the top is Muspelheim, the realm of fire, and that's where the fire giants are. And on the bottom is Niflheim, and that's where the Jotnar, the ice giants, are. And the thing is, we have the fire giants. We don't really have a parallel. We don't have a corollary for the ice giants, which, I mean, there may not be one, because it's not like this is a Norse mythology game, but it's heavily inspired by it, so you might ask the question. And we do have the giant maidens in the Eternal Cities, who are on the opposite side of the world, in a sense, from the fire giants, and they all seem to be women, as opposed to the fire giants, who all seem to be men. So there is a kind of parallel there, where I wonder if there's more there than meets the eye. The Giants of Noxtella, yeah. What if in the intro we're not seeing Ronnie, but in fact the Snowy Crone? Yeah, that's another theory I've seen, in that maybe she's the Glomide Queen, which would explain her being an Empyrean, but that's possible. They are being guarded by Dragonkin soldiers who have learned Ice Lightning. Well, yes, and that's the reason that the Dragonkin soldiers use Ice Lightning is associated with the fact that they've never seen the sky. So it's something about being underground, and this is also parallels how the Band of Fallen Hawks, they were I can't remember the exact wording, but it's something like they were cursed to live underground forever because they started burning the bones of their fellows in Ghost Flame, and Ghost Flame is also a cold fire. And if we associate Ronnie's Dark Moon with the lost Black Moon of Noxtella, that would also have a cold association. So there's this idea of like, of maybe it's all just a song of ice and fire, you know. Okay, so the Glowmite Queen exists at some point. I mean, I just put these in here to just put them in here. These are really they're little like clouds because there's almost nothing to contextualize. There's almost nothing to contextualize their place in the timeline unless you suppose certain things which aren't strictly stated in the text. I mean, I have my own interpretation of this, but this is meant to be a bit more strict. And oh, and can I ask if anyone's on the Miro board right now? I would just ask that please wait until after the stream is done, or at least after I'm done looking at the Miro board, because it starts to get clogged up with the number of people in it. Okay, Malekith exists. Really, another difficult to place one. And now let's just look at the broad strokes here. So, Flame of Ruin is sealed. The Age of the Erd Tree begins. Now we have an Age of Plenty, which I would say is part of that Age of the Erd Tree. Because it's all about like the Erd Tree bestowing blessings. Potentially, this is actually the ancient Erd Tree here. What is going on? Stop. In any case, the Age of Plenty is short-lived. I think I wrote that here. Yeah, the Erd Tree once flourished with abundance, yet it was only for a fleeting moment. So it may not have lasted this long. It may have been very, very short. At some point, it starts to fade, and eventually what we come to is it's dying. However, in the opening intro, the fallen leaves are specifically connected to the shattering of the Elden Ring, right? The fallen leaves tell a story, and the story is what? The story is that the Elden Ring was shattered. So it's saying that the shattering of the Elden Ring is at least one of the reasons why the leaves are falling. Like the fallen leaves are an indication of what happened, which is that the Elden Ring was shattered. So it's possible that things were just dying. I think basically what you have is like you have this primordial form of the Erd Tree. Fire is taken away, so it's allowed to grow, but this is still short-lived. And even though it's like brilliant at first, even though it's brilliant at first, it's not something that can last forever that way. So it just starts dying away. We'll go down here first. Let's see. Now the war with the War of the Ancient Dragons. So the Golden Lightning Fortification is an incantation, and it's an incantation of Erd Tree worship. So it doesn't use the ancient Erd Tree sigil. It uses the modern Erd Tree sigil, the one that looks like a cross. I should probably put those sigils in here, actually, just for reference. But that means that it's at least in the age of the Erd Tree, which means after the Flame of Ruin is sealed. And when exactly this happens is not clear. We know that it ends before the Night of the Black Knives, because Godwyn is the one who defeats Fortissax and befriends him, and the dragon cult is founded. Otherwise, it could kind of go anywhere in here, as far as I can tell. I don't think there's anything that places it more particularly than this. Uh, somewhere after the Flame of Ruin is sealed, and before the Night of the Black Knives. I think it could be anywhere in there. So that means that it could have happened during Godfrey's or Radigan's reign. That's not totally clear. And because the Erdtree worship is not incompatible with the Golden Order existing, so the creation of the Golden Order does not mean that Erdtree worship stopped. So that's yeah. So it's possible that War of the Ancient Dragons happened. Now I think it's more likely that it happened earlier on, because there's no mention of how like Radigan's children fit into this. And you would think like it's hard to imagine that there's this giant war against dragons and like Radahn isn't involved in that. I mean, maybe not. Maybe that's fine, but it just doesn't quite seem to match. So I would guess on the earlier side. We have the two Lyrian wars. Radagon appears. First mention of him is in the first Lyrian war. And at the end of that, he marries Rennala. Oh, and we also have the births here. Again, no real way to tell who's born when. My guess with Godfrey's children is that Godwyn was born first. Partly because, like, okay, you have this first divine heir, and he's got the God name, right? And he's golden. And Moog and Morgott, like, Morgott character-wise seems like a younger brother to me, in like a narrative sense, in that he's got a bit of a chip on his shoulder and is like looking up at the Order of the Erdtree and like trying to be more responsible to it, even though all the other children have, I don't know, that just kind of seems to fit in a way. And then Moog's the like the black sheep, you know. And also they're called omens, which seems like this is, so there's this idea that in the ancient past humans had features of the Crucible, right? Like that's just what humans look like. They look like omens essentially. But I think the idea with calling them omens is that it's a sign of where things are going, that things are actually going to regress. They're going to return back to a kind of crucible state. So I would put them after Godwyn, since he doesn't seem to have those features. Although, arguably, it's possible that he had a fishtail to begin with. Although I think that's more associated with him half dying. But, it's possible. Let me read some comments. Do you think there is any hope for the Golden Order, or will the world stagnate if it continues? The Golden Order is fungible. So there are different ways of ordering things with gold. And the reason that things, so there is the removal of Destined Death, which is the defining feature of the Golden Order. And that seems to cause problems on its own. But there's also this implication that like the Golden Order has become stagnant, and it doesn't need to be. So the Golden Order can be flexible. Like Rogier talks about this, how it can adopt in different practices. It can be, like Radagon marrying Rennala. It can be more pliable. And that seems to be like something that will help it survive. Radagon's church, Stormcaller Church, right by the Dragon War Memorial with a dragon incantation inside, is super weird. Yeah. Well, that's another reason why potentially the war with the dragons happened after because it would also it would be see there's a bunch of as I was doing this timeline, like I was thinking there's so many different interesting implications if certain things happened simultaneously or like around the same time. So like you imagine that Godwin defeats Fortisax. There's this giant. So the war with the ancient dragons starts with Grand Sax attacking the capital, right? Is an enormous dragon attacks the capital. That means that Lendel is already built, by the way, because we had the fortified manor, which seems to be an older construction, and potentially, I tend to agree with tarnished archaeologists that the Eternal Cities were above ground at some point, and that's part of Lendel reflects that kind of architecture, and it's right on top of the unnamed Eternal City, and it's got a giant hole in the middle of it. So potentially there was an earlier time, right, where there was just this fortified manor with the round table inside and the Eternal City stuff around it. And then Lendel was built at some point. So the War of the Ancient Dragons is after that. But it's interesting to think about, like, if if Radagon became Elden Lord, and then the War of the Ancient Dragons happened. Because as far as I can tell, there's no reason that couldn't have happened that way. And that would mean that, like, Godwin was still around and still Godwin the Golden, and he's like this super powerful popular figure as this golden demigod who is able to bring peace and bring an end to this war. So that's kind of an interesting thought experiment, because potentially Radagon was involved in the Night of the Black Knives. I mean, we already know that, right? I mean, am I missing anything here? Like, I'm trying to think of if there's anything that would make this obviously not compatible, but I don't think that there's anything that says that couldn't happen. And we know that Ronnie and Rykard at least were aware and participated in the Night of the Black Knives. So the idea, like, you know, it's like when a lion, I think when a new lion becomes like head of the pack, it kills all the children of the previous alpha, right? And I think it's not just lions. There's some other species that do that. But it would be interesting if Radagon is the one who's like, now he is coming into power and he's changing things, right? Like Godfrey's reign, there's all this like Colosseum combat. It's all about combat. He leaves because he has no one to fight, right? And then Radagon comes in. He's all about making peace and studying. And he is defining a new order. Anyway, I thought that might have been an interesting idea, and that could, if Radagon was Marika already, that could kind of explain the whole, like, was Marika involved in the Night of the Black Knives thing or not? Because maybe Radagon was involved and Marika wasn't, if that makes sense. So anyway, that's just a kind of a thought experiment. I don't really know about that, but it's hard to explain the Stormcaller Church. I agree with that one. That's a very weird thing, because it would connect Radagon with dragons in some way, which is hard to do unless, I mean, alternately, the War of the Dragons happened afterwards, and the dragon cult was founded, and then when Radagon became Elden Lord, this was just associated with him because the dragon cult was associated with the Golden Order in general at that point. The issue about that is that Godwyn should have been at the head of the Golden Host and involved in the Liurnia Wars, but it's Radagon. Well, also Godfrey. I mean, where's Godfrey in this, right? Like, Godfrey's going fighting people. Why is he not fighting the Liurnians? Oh, and one thing I should say about that, I don't think I wrote it here, but that I think it's the Giant Crusher says that after the war with the giants, man turned against man in violence, which seems to kind of indicate for me that that's like, yeah, well, I guess that's already confirmed by everything else, but I don't know. It is weird. Like, why is Godfrey not the one fighting the Liurnians? Why is Radagon? And yeah, if Godwyn was still alive, why would he not be fighting them? It's a little bit confusing. Potentially, all three of these happened at the same time, so that Godfrey was doing the Siege of Castle Morn stuff, Godwyn was doing the War of the Ancient Dragons, and Radagon was doing the Liurnian War. Those might have all been at the same time. That's possible. Yeah, Godfrey is also never mentioned in the War of the Ancient Dragons. Debatably, the Storm Lord could be him fighting Placidusax or another dragon. Hard to say. I mean, I really like the idea of a giant hawk. Partly because that kind of explains the twin bird stuff. Like, if one half of the twin birds is the crows and one half is hawks. But anyway, yeah, it's hard to say exactly when that happens. Yeah, so I basically put it as a giant cloud. It could be anywhere. It has to be in the Age of the Erd Tree, and it has to be before the Night of the Black Knives. It could also be that the Night of the Black Knives, like the reason Godwyn was killed was because he made war with the dragons. The other thing about this is that Godwyn is called Godwyn the Golden, and the reason he's able to make peace with the dragons is because is this idea that like dragon lightning and dragons themselves, and they are still gold. Like everything, this we are able to bridge this gap because everything's gold. So, and that idea, first of all, that ties into the Golden Order, but also that idea seems like it would happen before Radagon makes peace with Rennala. Because it seems like an easier bridge to make, like, oh, everything's gold, therefore we can make peace, versus the tree and the moon, which is like these are more like polar opposites in a way, or at least totally different concepts. So, anyway, that's some thoughts there. Morn has connection with the spirit world with a special jellyfish model. There's a unique jellyfish model there? I didn't know that. And it has that pierced gravestone. Oh, I mean, yeah. I mean, I suggested that Radagon was the hero of Castle Morn, but there's a lot. I'm going to go into this in my script, because the banished knights and exile soldiers are almost certainly from Ohid, as far as I'm concerned. Right? They have similar sort of like Roman gladiatorial, not gladiatorial, like hoplite armor. They've got these like kilts things, scaled kilts, and they have the same association with thorns. And they're wearing, red. So whatever Elemer of the Briar is, this land of Ohid, and that's arguably situated in the mountaintops, although that's a stretch. And also Elemer is much bigger, and the Banished Knights seem to worship... It's not clear if they worship dragons or if they hunt dragons, and that's also kind of associated with the same thing. I have something on that. I need to speed up though because I'm running out of steam already. But potentially that's what's going on in Castle Morn, is that that's also connected with Okhid, because it's this idea of like um the Leonine Misbegotten being connected to the Crucible being connected to Okhid. There's something there where potentially the Okhid people are like descendants of giants, and that's why they were banished. Um, but I need to have clearer thoughts about this. Radigan killed Godwin as an act of vengeance. Yeah, so that would be one idea. And I mean, the other thing about Radigan as the hero of Morn is it's really the only. Like, I know there's a lot of stuff which gets mentioned like once and then never mentioned again. But there's like a lot of context around Morn that doesn't really go anywhere, and we don't have any explanation for it. Which, I mean, maybe that's it. Maybe it's just like, okay, here's some extra backstory. But it would be more satisfying if it tied into a character that we already know. Anyway. Unless he was aiming for America and got Godwin instead somehow. Oh, as vengeance? He may not have known he was America at the time. And maybe Godwin was America? I don't know. I don't know. There's a lot of different room for speculation here. Oh yeah, and the Banished Knights have the thorn symbolism. Both associate with Godwin, and Neil is implied to have served him too. A lot of trails lead to Godwin being the Stormlord. That's another possibility. I know you've promoted that theory, Puzzlehead, and I do like it for certain. I mean, in general, I'm leaning much more towards the idea that Newman are somehow related to dragons. They're like reborn dragons, and that's why they're new men. Maybe that's it. That's an idea which I need to develop more. But it does make sense. You know, Godric says he calls the dragon his kindred and trueborn heir. Radigan fights like a lightning user. Yeah. Radigan arguably is not Godwin reincarnated because, see, this is where it gets confusing, because we know that Ronnie, at the very least, Ronnie was here at the Night of the Black Knives, and she is said to have been born of Radigan. However, if she was born of the Amber Egg, it's possible that she existed before. This is a much more of a stretch here, but if, let's say, Ronnie existed before the Liurnian Wars, that she was born way before, and then she killed Godwin, and then Radigan comes here, and Radigan marries Renala, and he gives Renala the Amber Egg, which, like, is giving her the child Ronnie. Radigan is the Glowmide Queen. I mean, I have seriously considered that possibility. There is a lot of connections between him and Destined Death. And we know that here's the problem. Like, we know that people can be other people, and we know that dragons can be people, and that snakes can be people, and people call themselves other names, and that you can be two people at once, and that you can also be the opposite sex. So like all the theories about this person is this other person, like back in the Dark Souls days, those were kind of crazy theories. Like even my, I was and still fairly am convinced that Rosaria was Guinevere, reborn Guinevere. That was a crazy theory then, but none of that is crazy in Elden Ring because all of these things, like we have direct evidence that the identities of people are malleable. People are not the same, and it also ties in with all the Jungian stuff. Like if you think about this from a storytelling perspective, you're Miyazaki, and you're thinking about Jungian themes, which he has thought about, and he especially in Elden Ring he's thinking about. And it also with the Berserk stuff, there's a lot of Jung in that. And you're thinking about like the different archetypes that make up someone's personality. Like, well, maybe you just make a story in which literally people's personalities are made up of archetypes, and like they can split up their self into different people. I don't think this is a crazy idea. I think this is actually a very sensible idea. I'm not saying it's true, but it's just all of this stuff is on the table because there's too many places where the normal boundaries of like what makes a person is transgressed. You're Miyazaki. What are you thinking about? What are you thinking about? Swamps. Yeah. Okay. Okay, I want to get through this soon because I do want to check out the 1.0 stuff. With Radigan's connection to Destined Death, I thought it makes thematic sense that he is Marika's redness that gets removed from her when she removes Destined Death from the ring. There's a video out there analyzing Elden Ring under a Jungian lens. That's interesting. I'll have to watch that. If you want to know my theory, which I'm going to talk about in the script that I'm writing, and I'm trying my hardest to make this not sound like I'm absolutely insane. My theory is that Marika is the bald monk, Baldwin, or the gardener, or whatever you want to call him. That is Marika, and that she pulled the Helfin out of the spirit world by removing Destined Death, and that became the Golden Erd Tree in the Lands Between, which is a global interstice. And by doing that, she removed Radigan from herself. So it's, I'm going to try and formulate that in a way which sounds less absolutely insane. But I honestly think that this is the only thing that makes sense to me. I've been playing with that idea for a long time, and it sounds too crazy, and I just keep on coming back to it because there's nothing else that fits in that way. Okay. Anyway, a bunch of other things. The Night of the Black Knives. I'm not really sure where to place the Star Scourge I'm already losing it. The Star Scourge conflict. All we really know is that it happens after Radahn is born and before the Battle of Ionia. It's said to have happened in Radahn's youth, but that's still super vague. So, again, another like thought experiment. Like, okay, what if this happened during the War of the Ancient Dragons? What if this happened during the Night of the Black Knives? Maybe it happened literally during the Night of the Black Knives. Maybe there's some connection between Godwyn and the dragons and the stars. So there's a lot of stuff here which I started thinking about just because I'm visually putting this together. I won't get too in-depth into this. Actually, yeah, so I'm just going to zoom out a little bit. I won't go into the details. You guys can look at this on your own if you want. we are here, and this is after the Tarnished are called back to the lands between after the long march. Erdtree burns, and then we have our 6 different endings. Age of Stars, Lord of Frenzied Flame. I didn't really mention the one great because I'm not really sure about that. Anyway, I'm already losing it, so I'm not going to go through everything. But as you can see, there's a couple different categories here. So this is a map of the different ideologies and factions, at least the ones I think are important. So you can see that, and there's some like lines connecting them. For example, the ancestral following and the Order of Rot are connected in some way. Order of Rot is connected to unalloyed gold in some respect, which is also connected to the Mogwin dynasty. So I attempted to I didn't really describe the nature of these connections, but just connect them in some way. And then above this, we have the gods and the divine forces. We have the outer gods like the Twin Bird's Master, the Formless Mother, and Rot. Potentially the Entombed God or the Frenzied Flame. I'm not really sure what to put here. There's a reference, I think, in the Fingerprint Shield. There was a god that was... it came from the tomb of a god, which seems to relate to the 3 fingers. Possibly the 3 fingers are a god. I'm not really sure what to make of that at all. We also have Placidusax's Lost God, which could also be one of these other ones. Could also be Marika. And there's the Immortal Serpent Deity, which is another confusing part of it, because there's this whole serpent worship stuff going on. Do we have any background for why there's already ash strewn about Lindell before we burn the Erdtree? I mean, the obvious conclusion is that the Erdtree already burned. Right? I mean, I don't see another way that makes sense. It seems strange that they wouldn't have cleaned things up. Although, however, there is a giant dragon body that they haven't cleaned up either. That's a bit more difficult. But the fact that there's misbegotten in the really ashy part, potentially, I had this theory a while back that, like, when Marika shattered the ring, so there's a bunch of different things that, like, when Marika shattered the ring, the Erdtree shook, and it threw off these golden seeds, right? So it did something physical, right? It wasn't just the ideology was changed or something. No, this like had a physical impact. And I think that's possibly also when Farum Azula got tossed up into the sky. And possibly also that allowed the Crucible to kind of return in some form. So possibly the Erdtree burned then because she shattered the ring. Like, not fully burned, but like a little bit of fire. And that's how the Misbegotten were created. It's kind of a speculative theory, but it kind of makes sense to me. But yeah, I mean, it's got to be that the Erdtree burned at some point previously while Lindell was still around. So when that would be, kind of no context for it. The shattering of the ring is the only thing that really makes a lot of sense because it deals with the Erdtree specifically. Everything else, potentially Grandsax, like burnt the tree with some dragon fire. That's another possibility. I don't think the Erdtree is entirely a phantom. Yeah, I know that Tarnished Archaeologist recently suggested that, like, some people can't see the Erdtree. I'm not totally convinced by that. I think you could read the relevant sources in multiple ways. Oh, I also put up this, which you may recognize as the Big Dipper and Little Dipper, or Ursa Major and Ursa Minor, just because this is the North Star, sometimes called the Polar Star, and that's because it's at the North Pole, which makes it a very it's like it's always in the same place essentially. It doesn't that's it's on the axis of rotation, so it's a very useful thing for uh, people traveling water, like mariners, for instance, to use as a point of reference. So that was like sailors in the past, they used to use the North Star as a point of reference. So as far as the eight-pointed polar star is concerned, I think it must be something like that. It must be a source of guidance, something that you can orient yourself, potentially a way to orient yourself while you are in the, in between dead, still water place. It's hard for me to believe there were many people living in Lendell after Gransax attacked. Well, I mean, we know that a lot of things happened after Gransax attacked, so it's so difficult to put together because there's there's so like I think in the previous games there's like one big event that kind of screws everything up, whereas in Elden Ring there's like five kind of. Well, at least there's the shattering of the Elden Ring, there's the Shattering War, there's the Night of the Black Knives, there's like various wars beforehand with the Liurnians. There's like the transition of Godfrey to Radigan. There's the War of the Ancient Dragons. There's the War with the Fire Giants and like the beginning of the Age of the Erd Tree. And there's the beginning of the Golden Order and the removal of Destined Death. So there's like way too many things that all have dramatic consequences for the world. It's really hard to pin down like what's responsible for what. There were enough people to create a dragon cult. That's true. Yeah. Could the Glowmite Queen have burnt it back in the day? Yes, but again, like the further back you put this burning, it becomes a little bit like theoretically that ash could have existed. Well, we don't know exactly when Lindell was built. I think the first evidence that we have that it was built was the War of the Ancient Dragons. So theoretically, it could have happened at any time in between there. But the further back you put that, the weirder it is that there's just like ash sitting around that no one's dealt with, you know? Uh, so there's three different timelines there. You all can peruse through that and see if you agree or disagree. I tried to be very strict with the actual placement of things. Ideological map. There's also the fundamental elements, which is sort of like important things. Death, soul, ambition, principles, runes, fate, immortal essence. I'm going to talk about that in my video. The storm beyond time, three different types of lightning. The different types of fire. Now I arranged it in this, Fire Giant Eye format just because it was nice. I don't know if that is really what the Fire Giant's Eye represents, but it is interesting that that's the case. And the different I included the different colors as well as like they've got multiple colors, and the different types of damage they do. I didn't include in here the different types of wraiths. I might add that on, like the Omen wraiths and the Wraithcaller wraiths, because those both resemble the Prince of Death's flames. And the Omen ones do holy damage. They don't do death blight. The Wraithcaller ones do magic damage, which is weird, even though they look the same. Also, something to consider regarding the war with the dragons. We find a dragon cult prayer book in Farum Azula, implying the cult spread there, which means it should have been before its destruction. Well, there's two things about that which are a bit confusing. One is that the prayer book says it's a lost tome that never reached the lands between. So that's weird. Also, it's not really clear how you get to Farum Azula. So it's possible that, like, for instance, I think a clearer example than just the prayer book is that you have the malformed tree sentinel, right? The dragon tree sentinel is there, the draconic tree sentinel. And, but, like, potentially he got there the same way you did. So it doesn't necessarily mean that Farum Azula was attached at that time. Crazy thought, but what if the Erd tree wasn't planted until after the war with the giants? Like Marika goes up into the mountains, then comes back and plants it at the base of the mountain. I think that during the Crucible, before the war with the giants, you have rooty, branchy things that are all kind of chaotic. And even the giants look like they're made of... The fire giants literally look like they've got like bark skin. They look like they're made of trees. And I think what happened... This is what I'm going to get into with my next video. That at that time, life was just sort of tree-like. That was like the essence of life. And then what Marika did was she pulled she kind of pulled the spirit world into the real world. She pulled the inside into the outside. She turned things inside out and turned the lands between into like this weird interstice place where it's not where spirit exists as something manipulable. It's not just in a separate realm of reality. And I think that's what the bald monk is. So, yes, possibly. She did a Griffith. Technically, Griffith did not create Fantasia. The Skull Knight created Fantasia. Griffith just dodged the blow. Okay, anyway, that's this map. The link is in the description. You can all go look at it if you want. I might add more stuff to it, more layers to this. There's also some like themes. This was an afterthought, really. So, and you know, give me feedback if there's anything that I should definitely change. This is more just this is more for me trying to like organize my thoughts better. So that's that. Now I would like to show you some parts of 1.0. Because this is kind of there's some interesting stuff here. Whoops. Give me 1 second. I need to take a sip. Okay. What's the real color of gold? Silver. Okay, so this is 1.0. I've almost completed the whole game in 1.0. But if you're not clear on 1.0, basically it's the disc. If you buy like the disc PS4 and you install it onto your PS4 without connecting to the internet, without updating anything, that's 1.0. So over the past year, there's been a bunch of updates. This is what shipped. There was a bunch of stuff that got downloaded day one, and which radically changes the game into something approximating the version we know now. And then over time, there were other things added. But yeah, this is the original shipped disc version. I'm not hearing any sound. Is that coming through? Oh, yeah, there's a bit of sound there. Okay. So there's several changes, some that I can't show you. So there's the color of death birds, for instance. They don't have like ghost flame and stuff. They're all gold and orange, which is really weird. So like their wings, for instance, aren't blue; they're gold. That's an interesting one. I also can't show you Lendell because it's been burnt already, so sorry about that. I think Last Protagonist is going to do a 1.0 stream at some point, or video on it. So you'll probably see more stuff there. I also can't show you how some of Malekith's attacks are purple, which is suggestive. A couple special effect things that have been changed color-wise, but those are the major ones. A lot of missing stuff. So if I just show you, I mean, this is what I've completed. The little things that I've noted here are things that I haven't beat. So I haven't beat the Blackblade Kindred. I didn't do this one. Prison, what is it called? Gale Prison or something. I didn't do the whatever that Hero's Grave thing is. So wherever I marked stuff is where there's something that I didn't do. I think Gelmir Hero's Grave is bugged, so you can't finish it as far as I can tell. Otherwise, I was fairly thorough in going through it just to find stuff. And through that thoroughness, I mean, I didn't like, I didn't farm for stuff, but I like went everywhere. Like the amount of stuff that I have is actually surprisingly tiny. There's a bunch of stuff, like that's all the weapons. There's a bunch of stuff which is just not in the game. Golden Order Seal, for instance, is not in the game. As far as I can tell. I mean, there may be stuff that it's just in a different place, so I don't know where. Please show us Deathbird. Well, the only way I can do that is if I start a new game, so I could do that, but I want to show something in this one first. A bunch of stuff that's missing. Is that's the big impression, first of all. A bunch of item descriptions that are missing. I mean, if I go to like the spells, for instance, you can see the number of them that have almost nothing written. So that's a bunch of this stuff is, some of it is completely wrong. Like, for instance, this is the shooting star one. What is it called? Lusat's shooting stars or whatever. It's clearly the description is for a Carian sword sorcery. So like, okay, that's just wrong. I like this one's called Goliath's Reign of Stars. That's weird. I don't know who Goliath is. Maybe the first astrologer. But they clearly just changed stuff, like, and made up stuff. So it's kind of interesting to see how much is different. A lot of small changes to names. Blizzards of some more instead of, what is it called, Ice Storm or something. Yeah, but a lot of stuff is just not in the game yet. So I think basically they were working on things and didn't quite put them in, and so but I wanted to show off a couple things. So first of all, Health and Steeple, this is the same, but the skill is called Spectral Flames of Ruin. Right, so it's not a Ghost Flame thing. I mean, I can show you, this is Ghost Flame, right? But it's called Spectral Flames of Ruin, which is interesting. And also, instead of being an int scaling sword, it's a faith scaling sword, and it does fire damage. So that's totally different. And we can look at the other ones as well. Death's Poker, Spectral Flame Blast, but it's actually called Black Flame Thrust. Performs a thrust attack infused with the flames of death. This should be Ghost Flame, right? So clearly, like, as far as I can tell, Ghost Flame did not exist in 1.0. Ghost Flame was created from... they had this idea of, like, a colorless flame, which then got turned into Ghost Flame, and potentially got turned into both Ghost Flame and Black Flame. I can't remember if there's another thing that uses it. Oh, the spear. Where's the spear? It doesn't actually say. Reign of Death. There's just like spelling mistakes and stuff in it, so it's also just very, like, no one was meant to play this, you know. What else did I want to show you guys? Let's see. I like this description though. Sacred seal given by the underlying principles of chaos. It kind of sums it up pretty well. A lot of stuff that's kind of interesting. If you guys have anything that you want to see, I may not have it, but you can suggest it. First astrologer was a giant. That's pretty nuts to think about. I don't think it's a crazy idea that everybody was giants in the beginning. I mean, one thing that we see is that the descendants of giants are smaller than them, and that we have enormous giants way in the past. And that the idea of, like, and even actually, the page description says that people think that pages don't get the full blessing of grace, and that's why they're small, and so they're made into pages. And there's, like, the vulgar militia who are too tiny. So the idea that, like, when life is more vigorous, it becomes bigger, and they're called giants. But, like, they're all the same thing. The giants and humans, no difference. I mean, Renala is also, like, bigger than a normal person. The Mad Pumpkinheads and the Gladiators are bigger than normal people. As you go into the past, things get bigger. Grandsax is bigger than a normal dragon, you know? So, in the past, things are big. What else did I want to show? Let's see. Well, some of you may have seen this already, but it's worth pointing out because it's a pretty interesting one. Is Loretta's helm. Silver helm of the Arbor Sentinels, who serve the sacred tree of Mikola, the Scion Empyrean. Hailing from Raya Lucaria, these enchanted knights once belonged to the Carian royal family, but were later gifted to Mikola, recipient of the vision, by King Consort Radigan. That is a whole bunch of context that does not exist in the game now. And I'm not saying this is by any means canonical, but it's interesting that that's how Loretta was initially conceived. Because, like the Tree Sentinel, she also is permanently horseback, and, you know, she's wearing a tree crest and all that stuff, so the comparison is not idle. That was intentional. The Manlet Order. Yeah. Recipient of the vision is the most interesting phrase to me, because Enya says that even though Marika was imprisoned because of her her trespass demanded a heavy sentence when she shattered the ring, but she was still the vision's vessel. And I think this plays into the whole idea of the Elden Ring is like, it's this vision of order. It's your worldview that you make into reality. And that it's the leader of the world who carries the vision within them, and they have a duty to uphold that vision. And I think there's a lot of this has to do with the fact that Miyazaki became CEO of FromSoft, and he has to deal with this responsibility now. There's all this stuff about, like, duty and responsibility and a heavy burden of command and leadership, and how that can go terribly wrong. Yeah, as far as I can tell, the Black Flame... Oh, talking about Black Flame stuff. Let's see. Where is it? Here we go. The Queen in Black. Queen in Black cradles newborn apostles swaddled in this cloth. So this is not only was the Glow-Eyed Queen once called the Dusk-Eyed Queen, she was also called the Queen in Black. Which also, by the way, plays into her being Marika. Because Marika wears black, like, well, black and gold, exactly like Malekith. I guess hers is slightly more like dark blue, but it's the same kind of designs. Which are also the same kind of cloth things that you see in the Bestial Sanctum, Caelid. There's another reference to that as well, I think, in the sword. Sacred Sword of the Queen in Black, who controlled the Godskin Apostles before defeat at the hands of Malekith. Yeah. Is Goldmask's set the same? Did I get his set, actually? I think I was following his quest line, but, oh no, the mask is separate, isn't it? I don't think I got his set. I don't think his set exists, actually, because I went looking for that. Yeah, because I did get his rune. I think I'm right. Where's the... Wait. Yeah, I got his rune. Yeah, I forgot. It calls him Sir Gold Mask. But I don't think his set was there. I mean, there's so much stuff that's just missing. I may have missed it, but I was looking for that, so. What other interesting thing? Oh, this exists. This is the... Instead of a letter, Raya gives this to you to give you entrance to Volcano Manor. Or maybe, yeah, maybe Tanith gives this to you actually once you start doing it. Maybe that's it. This is interesting because it says it leads those who seek death roots with a trail of light, which it doesn't do, even in 1.0. I don't know why it says that. I mean, there's some things which are just... Whoa, I don't think I read this one, actually. A nostrum used by members of the Carrion royal family, made from gathered moon tears remaining above ground. What the fuck? An old magic hides within, known to interfere with fate itself. What is a nostrum? What is a nostrum? I've never heard of a nostrum before. Nostrum, a medicine of secret composition recommended by its preparer, but usually without scientific proof of its effectiveness. Interesting. Oh, I see. It has like implications of a quack medicine or like a grifter. I don't know if that's the meaning here, but it still frustrates me so much that Goldmask isn't tarnished. It's like the perfect summary of how little they tell us about the tarnished in the outside world. Yeah, I mean, the thing about Goldmask is that he actually predicted the return of grace. Right? So, like, he was studying... Well, we do know that the Two Fingers have churches outside the Lands Between. That's the Confessor set says that. So there's churches outside the Lands Between that are about, well, at least the Two Fingers, and presumably about Marika and the Elden Ring. So this is a faith that extends outside of the world we explore. And Goldmask was outside of it, and he predicted in advance that grace would be returned to the Tarnished. by just understanding the Golden Order. I wonder if America's shattering of the ring is analogous to something like the split of Christianity and Judaism following the crucifixion. I don't know that the shattering... I mean, I think that historical analogy is kind of in the story. I don't know if it's about... The shattering is related to that specifically. The shattering is more specifically related to, like, the overall functioning of society. I would say more what you're talking about would be more like the difference between Erdtree worship and the Golden Order and Golden Order fundamentalism, and like these different sort of denominations of the main religion is more what you're talking about. What else did I want to pick? You know, I took a bunch of screenshots, so maybe I'll remember one if I look at it here. Oh yeah, Creepus's Vial. Small bottle sealing away the shadow of death. And by the way, if you notice that's the sign that's on the Confessor set, and I think it's also on that one shield, the sword and tree shield or something. It's a small shield. Not really sure what that's about. This is a fun one because it... Oh yeah, the malformed dragon set. So this is the Draconic Tree Sentinel set. He has a name. He's called Gnarl. I don't know why they got rid of that. I like knowing that his name is Gnarl. This is the Clean Rock Greaves, which called Melania the Red Queen, which is... I think they probably got rid of that because Queen has a more specific description. I mean, we only have, like, Marika and Renala, and potentially the Glowmide Queen in the retail version, so... what else do we have? Wait, was this something? No. Achievements. Oh yeah, we also got a name for the Drake Knight set. Andre the Dragon Tracker. That's kind of neat. What else did I look at? Birak is a giant. So going on with my idea that everybody's giants, that the fire monks were, or at least the fire prelates, were potentially giants themselves. So that's an interesting idea. Imagine you have one chance at life and your parents name you Creepus. What a sick joke. Yeah. That's rough. That's a rough one. Maybe it's Crepus. It's like more Latin sounding. Let's see. What else is here? Yeah, these were just things I wanted to think about. Renala the Fertile. That's an interesting name. I don't think that was it for any particular reason. This is an interesting one. Morgoth the Elden Lord. Okay. I think we have some interesting cut story points here. Not sure about that. Radon is called the God of War. I'm kind of going through these quickly. Second gen Albinaurics are called the Silent Frog People. That's pretty great. Garrus was called Gareth. That's not a big one. Oh yeah, the Blade of Gold skill is called Sacred Flame. So it is specifically golden flames, which they got rid of that connotation in the retail game. And I haven't beaten Elden Beast yet, so I haven't gotten the Sacred Relic Sword, but I'd be interested to see if it refers to it as flame, because I would imagine it does. Because it is odd that the Elden Beast attack, the Sacred Relic Sword, and this weapon both produce things which look like a golden flame, and there's a connection between this and the Black Knife weapons, which produce the flames of destined death, but they're not called flames, but in 1.0 they were, so. Morgott won the Elden Bowl, yep. I don't know why I picked that. Yeah, so this is the Ghost Flame explosion or whatever. What's it called? Ghost Flame something. But they call it Flames of Death. So again, I think Black Flame, Ghost Flame were at one point more just kind of the same thing. Like there's Dead Flame, which is lacking a kind of color to it. Yeah, this isn't super interesting. Here's an interesting one. Robe worn by members of the Empyrean family. That's a different idea. For people that are trying to figure out exactly what makes an Empyrean. Like, okay. Talking about the flames, I'm just looking at stuff from 1.0. And nice to see you, Sorrel, by the way. Yeah, I'm not getting deep into the flame stuff, and I'm trying to wrap up relatively quickly because my voice is going. I need to eat something as well. I don't really want to look at all oh, what was this? Right, the gold ornamentation atop the white pelt, this refers to the back of the armor, is an old design called a herb of many aspects. That's kind of an interesting one. So if we look at actually what that's referring to, that is this. You can't see it very easily. There's some place that I can go. Here. Oh, come on. That's a herb of many aspects. So I'm not really sure what that means exactly. There is an interesting... Yeah, I'm not sure. There is an interesting thing about mistletoe, which in the Norse myths, there was the golden god, the golden sun, Balder, who made peace with everyone and everybody loved him. He was killed by Loki, striking him with a branch of mistletoe, because mistletoe is the only thing in the world that didn't swear an oath to not kill him. And so Loki could kill him with it. And then in Ragnarok, Fenrir, the great wolf, would swallow the sun, create an eclipse, and during that eclipse, Balder would return to life. So there's an interesting Godwin parallel there for sure. And I was thinking of that with the herb of many aspects. Yeah, it is kind of wild how much stuff was changed in 1.0. I mean, so many item descriptions. So many item descriptions don't exist. So many item descriptions were changed in tiny ways, but that are extremely significant, you know? This is called Ancient Elden Will. It's kind of interesting. Oh, what is that? Yeah. Most of these are not super interesting. What was this? The mimic tier is called Silver Sludge. That's nice. That's not changed, I don't think. Yeah, I don't think this exists in the retail version, that it says specifically that they are they consume dragon flesh. I think the implication was already there, like all the dragon imagery and stuff, but anyway, that's the Banished Knights. Oh, the slumbering egg is called a moon egg. Yeah, this one was interesting. So I think the retail version says something about how they eschew letters and metalworking. But this one goes more clearly into the metal stuff. They shun metallic objects and steer clear of anything metals have influenced in the course of civilization. And if you were to put those together, you, like, not saying that this is canonical, obviously, but if you were to put those together, you would get the idea that letters are something that metals have influenced, which is an interesting concept. Selen's Primal Glintstone? Yeah, I did have it here. Was there something there? I don't think there was anything different. I just wanted to get a picture of it to look at it closer. I think that's the same. Oh, the scaled armor is called Drake Scale Helm. So it's specifically dragon scales. Dark Bull-eyed. Not Comet Azure. That's kind of odd. Some stuff which is just... So again, like, the Ghost Flame stuff just doesn't exist. There's nothing... As far as I can tell, there's no reference to Ghost Flame in 1.0. And in fact, I'm not sure there's a reference specifically to Black Flame. So I think it's all kind of one thing. It's just like Death Flame, and all of that stuff is still holy in 1.0. There's no freezing, there's no cold flame. An Electrum Water Lily. Yeah, I mean, most of these are just like tiny little differences. Yeah, this is the famous Great Tree, Erd Tree debacle. I might upload these somewhere just so that people can see them, but I don't remember why I took some of these pictures. The Stormvale Knights, the Banished Knights sought the Storm Aerie. So this is kind of interesting because in Leyndell in 1.0, Leyndell is completely... It's all Banished Knights and Exile Soldiers. There's no Leyndell Knights, there's no Perfumers, there's no Pages, nothing like that. It's all the Banished Knights stuff. Same stuff as in Stormvale. So in 1.0, the idea is Banished Knights fled from the capital to Stormvale in order to seek out the Storm Aerie, which presumably is Farum Azula. So, yeah. Interesting idea. And this has a quote which I don't think exists in retail. Expose thyself not, but govern thyself to be whole hid, else the curse slip inside thee. Yeah. Yeah, most of this is not really dramatically different. The Spirit Calling Bell is called a Wraith Calling Bell. And as far as I can tell, there's no Wraith Calling Bell. That's interesting. The Dragon Aerie, no, we are not in DS2. Anything else interesting I wanted to point out? Oh, yeah, this is a good one, actually. Oh, well, first, here's the one that I mentioned in my previous video, where it says that people don't want to reproduce anymore. Nobody wants to have sex. This is an interesting one. The entirety of the lands between were all one great holy land before the fracturing of the Elden Ring. And now, one idea that I had, I mean, again, this is not canonical, but this also doesn't seem contradictory with what I was saying before, that, like, when the Elden Ring was shattered, the tree physically, there was a physical result from that. It wasn't just a metaphysical thing. It had a physical impact. And another way to put this, by the way, is, you know, the description, the retail version description of the Elden Star's Incantation, which says that it is said that long ago the Greater Will sent a golden beast, the Greater Will sent a golden star bearing a beast into the lands between, which later became the Elden Ring. Well, grammatically speaking, that is an ambiguous sentence, because the second clause, which later became the Elden Ring, is not, it's vague. There's a comma and it uses which. It's not that. That is restrictive. Which is not restrictive. So, which could refer to either the golden star, the beast, or the lands between. The Greater Will sent a golden star into the lands, sent a golden star bearing a beast into the lands between, which later became the Elden Ring. It's possible that the lands between became the Elden Ring. I know that's a crazy idea, but if you think about the Elden Ring as like this net, this construct of the order of life, it kind of makes sense. Like, it represents the lands between. And by the way, there's other stuff outside of the lands between that there doesn't seem to be anything relating to the Elden Ring. It's not like if you define the Elden Ring as this thing which it controls the universe, like, really? Does it control the land of reeds? They seem to be doing a totally different thing there, right? All of these other countries outside, like the ones where the Tarnished are killed in, is that actually controlled? Is that actually affected by the Elden Ring? The Elden Ring is here. It's in the lands between. It's this Erd Tree. And potentially there's other Erd Trees elsewhere, maybe with their own Elden Rings. So the idea that the lands between became the Elden Ring, I don't know. That's a thought I was playing with. Sex lore, yeah, exactly. Goldmask's ending is the most interesting one to me, alongside maybe Ronnie's. I'm disappointed how little interest there is in people figuring out precisely the mechanics of what happens. I think you will be very pleased with my next video then, because I am really trying to pull apart the different denominations of the Golden Order and Erd Tree worship and stuff, and figuring out exactly what they believe and what these different principles are that make up the ring and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'm getting into exactly that. Also, on this topic, I can't see why the Elden Ring would affect/control the stars in Cosmos, but not other continents on the same planet or world. I mean, strictly speaking, the Elden Ring does not... There's nothing in the game that says that the Elden Ring controls the stars. The trailer, the very first trailer, which was before even 1.0, I mean, it's before the story trailer, it's before everything, that said it commands the stars. There is also cut stuff in the text, which didn't even appear in 1.0, which had as like there's about like 10 different potential intros in the text dump, um, none of which are used. And one of them says that the Elden Ring commands the stars. Uh, in the retail version of the game, that does not appear anywhere. What we have is that the Golden Order fettered the fate which was once writ in the night sky, and we also have that Radahn fought the stars and sealed them away. He arrested their swirling constellations, which seems to have to do with gravity magic rather than the Elden Ring. So it's not obvious that the Elden Ring does, strictly speaking, affect the stars. It's not clear what it means that the Golden Order fettered the fate written in the stars. It doesn't say that it... I mean, you have to sort of define what fate means in that context as well. Because fate would refer, again, to specific people and animals and life, you know, that, like, what is their fate? You don't have really I suppose you could have a fate of the universe, an inanimate fate. Well, that's just a more... Yeah, that's kind of a complicated topic. So the telescope description, I wonder if it was changed, actually. Let me see if I have it here. Yeah, this is the same. The fate once writ in the night skies had been fettered by the Golden Order. So it's specifically the fate writ in the night skies. And it's not, the problem is that the Golden Order really refers to 3 or potentially 4 different things. One of them being the sort of composition of the Elden Ring itself. The Golden Order is also, an ideology and a religion made up of people, and also potentially the golden phantom Erdtree. So what exactly fettered the fate in the night skies is not clear. But I don't think it's out of the question that, like, whatever the Elden Ring is doing, it's not clear to me that... I mean, my assumption beforehand was that, like, oh, the Elden Ring, it controls the universe, essentially. But, like, it doesn't control gravity, it doesn't control time, it doesn't control geology. Like, all the things that it does, it affects life and the order of life within the lands between. It seems very localized, and it seems very categorically narrow. So I don't think it's just like a general thing in the universe. And it didn't always exist. So I think it makes more sense to think of it as an emergent property of the intelligent organization of life, rather than like some magical thing that... Because it is also a magical thing that you can, like, take and control, use as a power and to control things. But I don't think that's first and foremost what it is. Okay. I feel like the stars originally controlled fate, but then the Elden Ring and Erdtree wrested that control away from the stars. Yeah, that's a little unclear to me. It's a little unclear to me, because also this description could just be referring to Radahn if he was part of the religion of the Golden Order, if you see what I mean. The fate once written in the night skies had been fettered by the Golden Order through the hands of Radahn, who was using gravity magic to stop the stars from moving. That's one interpretation. Potentially it means something else, but I don't know. Without having a very clear conception of fate, which is one of the things that I'm trying to write about and trying to work out, it's hard for me to figure out exactly what that means. Maybe we should just give up on theories before the DLC? Nah. That's boring. Oh, someone talked about the online items. I think this is all the same. Oh, the finger severer looks different. Actually, it kind of looks like it's got Marika's rune on it. That's kind of interesting. Yeah, that's very interesting. Otherwise, I think they're the same. Okay, there are a bunch of things that I can't show you, but there is one thing that I definitely want to show you because this is super cool. So, let's go here. Erd equals fate in Norse. Yeah. Yeah, and she was one of the 3 giantess maidens at the bottom of the well. Here's Deep Root Depths, looking very golden and sunlighty. And actually what you can see is what's weird. So this is the Godwin Dream. Let me get a clearer view of it. This is the Godwin Dream skybox. But there's also like sunlight coming through the branches / roots. This is a totally different atmosphere, which honestly I think is way cooler. Really kind of disturbingly golden. Oh, to answer your question, Bilbo Baggins, there is a cut version of the intro. That this is where you're hearing it from. There's a cut version of the intro introducing the Tarnished, in which I think Fia is called Yulia, if I remember correctly, and yes, and it says Hora Ru, the Gold Mask. And if you think about it, actually, it sort of makes sense. So I think basically Gold Mask was just created later as a character. And they took that name because they thought it sounded cool. But originally, Hora Ru, who became Hora Lu, was called the Gold Mask because that's what Godfrey is. It's a golden mask. It's the false persona of a sort of calm and kingly leader that he had to put on in order to rule. And there is actually, even in the retail version, there's a lot of sort of thematic stuff regarding how, like, a ruler has to kind of, they're bound by duties. They are, they have to kind of pretend to be something that they're not. Oh, whoops. Anyway, I just thought this was pretty cool. I want to get out of here though. Warp up to the. I wish it still looked like this. Yeah, I kind of do too. And actually, if you look at the concept art, it's all golden, and there's actually some giant skulls at the bottom. But it kind of makes sense if you think about it. Like, the Erd tree is all golden and glowy, and this is what it looks like underneath. The gold is shining down. Oh, give me 1 second. I just want to work to Godwin's Arena, because I think Godwin's Arena looks much more like you can see what they originally planned. I'll work so that there's a good view. That item had the wrong name. Oh yeah, all of the smithing stones have a different name. Well, not all of them. Golden smithing stone, polar smithing stone. I can go to Roundtable Hold and check out the different names if you want. There's like black stone. Yeah. But yeah, this has a completely different feel to it than the version we get in retail. And it's kind of interesting because I think you can see the bugs much more clearly, which is a interesting idea. Yeah, I kind of I wonder why they changed it actually, because you can imagine there's maybe some technical reason, although I can't see what. More likely they changed it for lore reasons, which means that they didn't want this place to be gold, which is curious. But yeah, the thing that sticks out to me is like, it makes him look much more rotten. He looks rotten, you know? Do I have the... Yeah. And he has that, you know, sort of dark cloth with golden filigree. Very similar to Marika's attire and Malekith's attire. Yeah. Anyway, I think I have to go because my brain is getting there. So, was there anything else I wanted to address? Yeah. Anyway, I mean, keep an eye out. I'll have a video out as soon as I can get it done. It's kind of busy at the moment, but I will try to do that as soon as possible. If you guys have the disc, you should try playing 1.0. It's kind of interesting. Maybe not. You'll find it interesting just because of that things are in different places and things have slightly different names, and so it's just like a slight different flavor to the whole game. It's certainly incomplete. Like it's not just a different version of the game. It's an incomplete version of the game. But it was interesting to go through it. So yeah, and let me know what you guys think of the next video when that comes out. So I'm trying to kind of put all of my thoughts together, and it's proving difficult, but I'll try to get it out as soon as possible. So thanks for stopping by, everyone. Appreciate it. All right, take care.